ध्यायेत् शारदचन्द्रसुन्दरमुखम् ताम्रारविन्देक्षणम् भक्ताभीष्टवराभयप्रदकरम् कौपीनमात्रोज्ज्वलम् स्वात्मानन्दरसानुभूतिविवशम् सर्वानवद्याङ्गकम् श्रीमन्तं श्रीरमणेश्वरं गुरुवरं योगासनाध्यासितं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरं ध्यायेत् श्रीरमणेश्वरम् हृदयकुहरमध्ये केवलं ब्रह्ममात्रम् यहमहमिति साक्षात् आत्मरूपेण भाति हृदि विषमनसा स्वं चिन्वतामज्जतव पवनचलनरोधा आत्मनिष्ठो भवत्वम्। Namo Ramana. We commence the Wednesday Satsang from Ramanacentre Center for Learning by reading Bhagavan's Upadesham and meditating on it. We have been reading his Upadesham from the book Years in the Presence of Ramana, my Master, written by Mahakrishna Swami. Basically, it is his reminiscences of his stay in Ramanashramam before he was ordained by Bhagavan to relocate in Brazil and open a Ramana ashram there. And this has been originally edited by our founder president, Sri A.R. Natarajanji. In this book, Mahakrishna Swami goes on to present Bhagavan's teaching and his stay in Ramanashramam under various chapters, and the second chapter is about natural happiness, and the third chapter is about the art of dissipating the illusion. Basically, Mahakrishna Swami is saying that Bhagavan's teaching is to reveal that happiness is natural to oneself, and if we fail to recognize it, the only reason we fail is because of the illusion that we hold on to. And in this chapter, he has compiled the questions put to Bhagavan and how Bhagavan has answered to dissipate those illusions. After meditating on this week's question answer, we will have a practice of self-enquiry for 20 minutes. Following that, our president, Sarada Akka, would be talking about Ramana Gita, which is basically, again, a compilation by Ganapati Muni of Bhagavan's teaching in Sanskrit, over 18 chapters. And Akka has been recapturing what each chapter highlights about Bhagavan's teaching. So this week's question answer is about how does one know what is correct action. Bhagavan says, the perception of correct actions comes automatically by pure intuition. Questioner then says, is a man conscious of the divine self, of some usefulness for he who seeks self-consciousness? Is a man conscious of the divine self, of some usefulness for he who seeks self-consciousness? Bhagavan says, yes, he helps to dissipate the illusion that you are not the truth. How is this possible? Is the question. Bhagavan says, by meditating and devoting under the orientation of the master. Then the questioner says, is self subject to transformations? For example, after death, Bhagavan says, who is the witness of these transformations? Questioner, do you express yourself as a non-dualist? Bhagavan, yes, exactly. Questioner, but the submission of which you speak is part of Bhakti Yoga. Bhagavan says, Gnana Yoga, Bhakti Yoga are the same thing. Then the questioner says, so must I conclude that I am consciousness and that nothing happens if not due to my presence? Bhagavan says, to reach a conclusion by logical reasoning is one thing. To feel it is something altogether different. You must become conscious of the divine essence. So, how do we know the correct actions? Bhagavan talks that we will know through intuition. Now, in this whole of this question and answering, the question is put to get a sort of understanding about right actions, about usefulness of being self-realized, and all things about whether that self-consciousness will remain even after death, and whether Bhagavan is non-dual or dual. It's all, and finally, whether consciousness is the only thing which is required, without which nothing else happens. So all of this is an intellectual understanding that the questioner is trying to put to Bhagavan. And we also actually approach all satsangs or all book reading or all things trying to intellectually understand. Yes, it is important to intellectually understand it, but the Bhagavan's final answer to all of this is the most important thing. That no matter whether I understand about whether the self survives after the death, whether the actions, I know the correctness of the actions, and all of this, I may ask whether I will be useful after self-realization. I may ask all of this. Bhagavan is saying all of that intellectual understanding, which we are trying to put under various heads, because once we come to the realm of duality, we see body, its death, we see actions and its rightness and wrongness, we see that there is somebody not self-realized and somebody being realized, and what is the use of this, what is not the use of that, and whether intellectually, when I understand that consciousness is the substratum on which everything else is happening, even at that stage, there is something else and the consciousness. So always when there is duality, doesn't matter for Bhagavan what is the nature of the duality, whether it is pertaining to actions, whether it is pertaining to consciousness, whether it is pertaining to self-awareness, Bhagavan puts all of it. Nanda Kumarji always says, he just grabs everything and brings it to the root. To whom is this? There is an I which is trying to understand it, trying to get an understanding of it. Whether it is logically, intellectually, doesn't matter. But Bhagavan's answer, the last question, is the most important. To reach a conclusion by logical reasoning is one thing. To feel it is something altogether different. You must become conscious of the divine essence. Why the logical reasoning, though the logical reasoning or the logical understanding or the intellectual knowing or the intellectual understanding is a very good approach. But one of the things that we will see in the practical life is, like as Duryodhana says, Janami dharmam nache pravrittihi. So I know what is dharma, but I can't practice at the right time. Similar is all of this understanding that we, intellectual and logical understanding we gain. It is all fine in the understanding, but eventually when we have to practice, we may forget, we may not recollect, we may do something like, let us say there is a pain and I know that it is non-dual, but I am experiencing the pain, the mind keeps going back to it. So I may not even find any use of my intellectual understanding at that place. It's only that the self, which here and now transcends all of this duality, to get established in that essence is the most important thing. Therefore, Bhagavan is saying that the importance of getting established in the divine essence is different from the intellectual understanding. But he is not saying that the intellectual understanding is not important. If it was not important, he would have not answered all those questions. He has answered all of those questions, but eventually Bhagavan says that it is an aid. It is something useful to point at, that there is no point in looking all of these things, but to get back to the natural truth, the natural essence of oneself. It is like reading 100 times what sugar is. Sugar is sweet. If I have not tasted it at all, I would have absolutely no idea what sweetness is. Say if I have tasted it also once, then too, when I say sugar is sweet, I'm recollecting some past experience. It's not like I'm experiencing the sweetness now. So in either which way, whether I have intellectually understood that sugar is sweet, or I am recollecting based on some past experience that the sugar is sweet, it is not essentially same as tasting the sugar here and now. And Bhagavan is trying to say that you must become the conscious. Becoming is the most important thing which Bhagavan is emphasizing. Now, what is becoming means? Do I need to become something? Bhagavan and all Mahavakya says, Tat Tvamasi, you are already that. So if I am already that, what is becoming then? Becoming then is only to let go all the wrong ideas which make me feel I am not that. By holding on to all these dualistic thoughts and giving them the reality, and try, once I give the reality, I need to understand what it is trying. If the question is about the rightness of action, I need to ask, I have given it a reality. I feel actions are real and I want to know what is the right actions. Therefore, I give it a reality and then I act in that direction, asking somebody how to know what my actions are right or wrong. But all of that has moved me away from my natural state. I have given duality more importance over the essence. So Bhagavan is again and again emphasizing here that the elimination of duality, the elimination of illusion is the most important thing. Therefore, we see Bhagavan bunching up everything, no matter what kind of thoughts are there, good thoughts, bad thoughts, intellectual thoughts, spiritual thoughts. He will only ask us to inquire to whom is this. Because all the attention we give to any of those objective thoughts, experiences, is keeping us in the realm of duality. There is a seer, then the object of seeing, which is the thought, and the act of seeing. So there is this triputi or the duality which is there. By bringing all of them, putting all of them into one thing, to whom is this, who am I? Bhagavan simply cuts away all the attention which is going towards duality. So the enquiry, to whom is this, who am I, is the most sharp tool that we can use, because we were so used to duality, Bhagavan says that use it as an opportunity to get back to the non-dual state. Every time the duality rises, inquire to whom is this. It becomes an opportunity to inquire. And when we inquire, so we find it is for me. And this I, again, is the one which is the seer of the scene, of the object, which is the thoughts and everything. But who is this I when I inquire? What do I really refer to as I when I inquire and try to find the source of the real I? That real consciousness dives within and tries to attend to itself. It no more tries to attend to any duality. So there may be no objective experience there, and because we are habituated for objective experience, many times people complain when I ask the question, who am I see a blank. Who sees the blank? So again, that means we are trying to know, trying to understand objectively, trying to again use the dualistic way of understanding. But Bhagavan, even when we say to I see a blank, he puts the question, who sees the blank? So that we come back to that natural awareness, that natural presence of ourselves, which is unchanging amidst all of this rising and falling of duality, and recognizing that as our real essence and becoming established in that. The more and more we get back to that natural truth, the dualistic nature, the disturbance caused by the dualistic nature starts to diminish until the whole of it subsides in that non-dual truth alone. Until such time, Bhagavan says, we should keep on practicing this vichara. So it is not an intellectual understanding. It is the experience that matters. Bhagavan says, being is knowing, not that knowing is being. Knowing is not really the being. Being alone in the truth is the real knowing. So that is what the inquiry, Atma Vichara, makes it happen every time we diligently practices. Because no matter what is the disturbing objective thing which is appearing, whatever is causing our attention to go out, it cannot cut asunder all of them and bring it back to the I, and from the I to the self. And by repeatedly bringing it back and establishing us in the truth, Bhagavan makes us recognize that the truth alone is. Bhagavan's immense grace, with which alone we have come to this most direct path, let us practice self-enquiry for the next 15 minutes. Revatima, please help me keep the time. Thank you, Revati ma'am. Namo Ramana. Over to Sarada Akka.
Namo Ramana. Prostrations to Ramana, shining as a self in all beings, by the immense grace of the self manifest as Ramana. We in this part of the satsang are meditating on the Ramana Gita, and having by the grace of Bhagavan finished the in-depth meditations on all the 18 chapters of Ramana Gita, we are now going through, in brief, the chapter headings of the Ramana Gita, which is 18 chapters. And we saw that the first 6 chapters, the first chapter is the importance of practice or importance of self-abidance, is how Ramanacentre translates it. Upasana Pradhanya Nirupanam. The second is the Ekashloki of Bhagavan, Hridaya Kuhara Madhye, the 3 parts. Then we come to the very important chapter, the paramount duty. Mukhya Kartabhya Nirupanam, the 3rd chapter, which clearly says that self-abidance is the highest duty if we desire the highest. Mahadichata, who wants to attain the highest, to such a one, that alone is the highest duty. And then we went on to the chapter 4, nature of jnana, chapter 5, signs of the heart. Each of these chapters, as we have known when we meditated upon them, is a very, very crucial part of our entire sadhana. The first one, of course, is the importance of self-abidance. So, any goal other than self-abidance, any goal other than experiencing the self will not give us experience of the self. It is an example given by one of the devotees of Bhagavan, senior devotees, was asked, is it important that I should practice self-enquiry alone? If I find self-enquiry difficult, then may I practice something else? And his answer was, if you want to learn to play the veena and you find it difficult to play the veena and you start playing the violin, will you end up playing the veena? You will not end up playing the veena. Though it is not exactly complete parallel in itself, the point being made is, if that is the goal, if self-abidance is the goal, then self-abidance is what one must strive for. And there are the paths which Bhagavan has given, which are Chinvata, Majjata, and Pavana Chalana Rodhat. One is control of breath, but it is, interpretations say that the control of breath goes along with Chinvata and Majjata. Chinvata and Majjata, enquiry and merging, which is who am I and whence am I. And then, as I said, the paramount duty. And then we get the nature of jnana, which Bhagavan says is not a mere concept. And then he goes on to the 5th chapter, the signs of the heart. And he gives us the physical location, in the sense the location within the body. This is apparently physical, but not really physical, because it is an experience. It is an experience of a locus to the right, a little to the right of the center of the chest. This is the experience. It is as much an experience as any other experience of ours, and experiences are not physical. Experiences are mental. So this may be a mental experience to begin with, but if it is used as an aid, then it leads on to becoming a real experience. So that is the science of the heart. And we said the 6th chapter is mind control, where Bhagavan talks about breath control as a means of mind control. But Bhagavan always says Ramana says that what he is talking about is not control of mind, but the dissolution of the mind, mano nasha, and not mano laya. So laya, what happens? What is the difference between laya and nasha? In laya, the mind returns after the period of laya. Even if it is samadhi, even if it is savikalpa samadhi, after that the mind comes back again and it functions with the normal identification with the body. So that is laya. But then nasha of the mind is there is no more any vasana left. There is no more any tendency left. There is no more any question left. Only the anubhava of the self is there. So that nirvasana mauna, Bhagavan says, that is to be attained. So the seventh chapter, very important chapter, is a chapter on self-enquiry. So let us dwell a bit on this, though the seventh, it's the chapter has been gone through by us, but some of the important verses of that, let us just dwell on before we go on to the further chapters. In the further chapters, we will find that chapter 8 is about ashrama vichara, which is stages of life, which is a little external to the sadhana. But again, in the 9th chapter, we come to a very important aspect of the sadhana, which is granthi veda, or cutting of the granthi, the aham granthi, the knot which creates the ignorance in us. Up till chapter 9, we will find that all except chapter 8, which we may say is a little external, but still it is defining our sadhana directly. All the chapters pertain directly to the internal sadhana. But after 9, we will find that there are other factors which are taken into consideration. Different questions are there, different people have different view the world, and thereby there are certain questions arising. So all those questions are taken up after chapter 9. So chapter 7 is by the questioner is Kashmi, and he asks Bhagavan, what is the form of self-enquiry and what are the fruits of self-enquiry? And Bhagavan's answer is, the first reply he gives is that all the thoughts are dependent on the I thought. So to seek the source of the I thought is Atma Vichara. Atma Vichara is not study of the scriptures, but it is searching for the source of the I thought. Then he goes on to say, what is the fruit of self-enquiry, which is very beautiful. Sarva klesha nivrittisyar phalam atma vicharataha. Sarva klesha nivritti. The fruit of self-enquiry is the destruction of all sorrow. The destruction of all sorrow. That means the joy which is to be experienced, the bliss which is to be experienced in self-enquiry is not a temporal bliss. It is not a temporary bliss. It is the very nature, one's own nature experiences bliss. So it is unbounded, it is unlimited, and it is natural. It is not attained and lost. So, Sarva klesha nivritti syat phalam atma vicharataha. Phalana avadhis soyam asti netodhikam phalam. There is no fruit to be attained that is greater than the fruit of self-enquiry. Asti netodhikam phalam. There is no fruit that is higher than the fruit of self-enquiry, says Bhagavan. And then he goes on to say, Adbhuta siddhaya sadhya upayantara taschaya. If we undertake other practices, we can get wondrous siddhis. Siddhis means attainments. Any kind of attainment of knowledge, there are paths which lead to the experience of several worlds. The world of sight, the world of sound, the world of various senses in its heightened blissful manner. So there are many, many worlds which can be experienced. The world of art, the world of music, the world of dance, at a subtler level, not at a physical level. When one goes into, say, the world of music, into nada, then one loses oneself in it, and it will be a blissful experience. It is a siddhi. It is an attainment. Why? Because when one comes out of it, then it is not there. One comes out of that experience. It is not permanent. It is attained. That which is attained will be lost. And it has to be attained again. It has to be sought again. One has to make the effort again. But that which is natural can never be lost. So Bhagavan says, Adbhuta siddhaya sadhya upayantara taschaya. By other means, you can get many wondrous siddhis can be experienced. Tav prapnopi bhavati ante vicharenaiva nirvritaha. Even if one has got many adbhuta siddhis, at the end, finally, release or moksha or self-knowledge can happen only through self-enquiry, says Bhagavan in this chapter. And though Kashni goes on to ask him about other means also, like Snanam, Sandhya, Japa, Homa, Bhagavan says all are good. For one who is starting their sadhana, all these are good, but ultimately one has to come back to self-enquiry. But say, what if one is going by the way of devotion or anything else where ekachintana happens? Bhagavan says, yes, experience will ultimately come to such a one also, but it is not directly known from the beginning. It is seen as an object. If there is an object and that object is leading to the bliss on account of one's immersion in that objective experience, there one loses oneself, and therefore obviously bliss will result. But it is not. It is attributed to the experience, and therefore it becomes objectified. Because we think because of this object, I have got this bliss. So the bliss becomes objectified. But the truth is, bliss is our own nature. It is not dependent on any object, even however exalted it is. So though the bliss of the self may be experienced by such a one who is objectifying it, he or she will not know that it is springing from the self, so that the experience becomes indirect. However, if one does self-enquiry and turns attention to the self itself, then what happens is that the experience is direct. One knows that it is the self alone that is the basis. One knows not as an object, but as one would know as one's own intimate experience, that it is the self. It is not, there is no duality in it. There is no coming and going from it. So that is the difference, says Bhagavan in the 7th chapter. The importance, the self-enquiry, the means of self-enquiry, and the fruits of self-enquiry. In the 8th chapter, Kashni continues to question Bhagavan about the stages of life. And Bhagavan says the stages of life do not matter in having adhikara to do self-enquiry. One may be a brahmachari, one may be a grihastha, one may be in any stage of life, but if one has the rightness to do self-enquiry, rightness being indicated by the eagerness to do self-inquiry, then one is fit to do self-inquiry. And then he says that if one's brahmacharya, the stages are ladders, they do not apply to one with a mature mind. But if in each stage one works in a detached manner, then it automatically leads to detachment in all the stages. Bhagavan also defines sannyasa here as pure knowledge. Sannyaso nirmalam jnanam. The renunciation is pure knowledge. It is not the attire, says Bhagavan. And then the householder, the purpose of a householder's life is to be completely detached, says Bhagavan. And if one is completely detached, even as a householder, then the vanaprastha and the sannyasa happens automatically because sannyasa is pure knowledge. So to be disciplined as a brahmachari, to be detached as a householder, and to continue to practice self-inquiry will lead one to the final stage, which is sannyasa, which is actually true knowledge, says Bhagavan, giving these new definitions of the stages of life. And then, as I said, we come to the 9th chapter, which is cutting of the knot. What is this knot? Bhagavan has defined this knot in Ulladu Narpadu as Chit Jada Granthi. That is, he says the body is insentient and the self is unborn, but within the premises of the body, within the boundaries of the body, something arises which says, I am born. What is that something? It is called the Chit Jada Granthi. It is the consciousness which has attached itself to the body. So, Bhagavan says that the knot is the link between the self and the body. Awareness of the body arises because of this knot. The body is matter, the self is consciousness. The link between the two is inferred through the intellect. We say there must be something linking these two. And it is by the diffused light of consciousness that the body functions. Since there is no awareness of the world in sleep, swoon, and so on, the location of the self is to be inferred. Just as an electric current passes through visible wires, the flame of consciousness flows through the various channels of the body and it lights up the entire body. And this, because of this, one becomes aware of the world. This point Bhagavan has made in the Hridaya Vidya chapter also, and he says, he repeats it over here, and he says this is what is considered to be the granthi. And because of the consciousness which is permeating the whole body, there's a sense that I am this body. But if the knot is twofold, one of the channels and the other of mental attachment. So when the mind is withdrawn from this mental attachment, then what happens is that a knot is cut. And it is done through self-inquiry. The body of the one who abides in the self through self-inquiry is resplendent, he says. Okay, so the cutting of the knot, which is important, most important, which is a secret, as they say, the Granthi Veda Kathanam is described by Bhagavan in the 9th chapter. To inquire, by inquiring, what happens, says Bhagavan, is that this link, the bridge, as it were, the ego, which acts as a bridge between the body and the self. When it is inquired into, when one asks, who am I, it automatically returns to, it falls back into its source of strength, which is the self. So, by questioning, the Granthi gets cut. So, these are the chapters up to chapter 9, and by Bhagwan's grace, we will continue whenever the next satsang comes from chapter 10 onwards. Om Namo Bhagavate Shivaya.
Thank you, Akka. Namo Ramana. Apara Satchit Sukavarirashe Yasyormimatram Bhuvanam Samastam Guhahitam Tam Ramanam Gabhiram Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami Chinta Vihinam Hrudi Chintayami. One Hakan.